people need to drop their ego.
Losing your ego. Losing your ego.
Yeah. How many times does your ego get in the way of you accomplishing?
How to self-inquiry to drop the ego once and for all.
You know, and this is where ego comes into play, because once you could switch that off.
So dropping the ego, losing the ego, switching the ego off, dissolving the ego. Many people want to get rid of their ego, switch it off, because it gets in the way. So now we have to lay on the space net and see what the space has to say about dropping the ego, stopping the ego, getting rid of the ego. Let us think this through. Who wants to drop is the first question. I have no clue who wants to drop the ego, who wants to switch it off, because otherwise it interferes. Who is this mysterious person who wants to switch it off? Okay, this is the first question. Let's think about this. Who can that be? And the second question, why? Why does that entity wants to drop the ego? Because then you reach the state of peace. One dude was explaining, so he wants to reach the state of peace, and he thinks he should drop the ego in order to achieve. Can we see the nonsense of all this? Can we see the futility of all this? The self-masturbation of the brain, the blaming. It is all based on blaming, and it can only be said by someone who did not really study the ego. Because in order to drop it, it needs to be something. Those people who say drop it, they apparently know what it is as something. Well, I can of course only guide you into my own experience. Let's just look at the ego. Can we find it? Where is it? I really concentrate now. Is it somewhere? Does it emerge from a dark corner of my existence? Which dark corner? It was Ramana Maharshi who had this crazy nice meditation on who am I. Of course, it's an ancient one. You can find them already in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, or in even older texts discussed under the word mala, but we don't go into Vedic vibes at the moment. We just want to do our own homework, to look the ego in the eye, to see what we want to drop. We are like the Baron von Munchausen when he was sinking in the swamp. He said, I will pull myself via my hairs out of this swamp. And he did it, he said later on. All these dudes who want to drop their ego, they are like Baron von Munchausen. They get themselves out of the swamp by pulling their own hairs. Now, we know that is only possible if you are the Baron von Munchausen. But who is pulling at what, and can that give rise to movement? Not in normal people. All the people who call drop the ego, get rid of the ego, switch off the ego, they have no clue what impossibility they create for themselves. They want to be a von Munchausen. That is impossible. There is only one Baron von Munchausen who is able to do this funny stuff. And that is not you. So, take home message from the space net. It is impossible to drop the ego, because who has to drop it? Who is that person who drops it? Look into it. It is nothing. And what the fuck is the ego? Also nothing. Just look it in the eye. In the eye. It has to be in the eye. But there is nothing if you deeply look into it. And who is looking? Who is looking? Just observe. You will become instantaneously enlightened if you see who is looking. There is nothing looking. So it is impossible to drop nothing from nothing. That is why the Zen master tells us that this is the sound of one hand clapping. It is all bullshit, the whole dropping of the ego stuff. Ow.